The glass doors slid open. An old man in a wet coat walked in, a worn canvas bag pulled on his shoulder. He stopped on the brass compass and said, calm and clear, "This bank is mine." People laughed. The manager smirked. The guards moved closer. The bag slipped, hit the floor. Thick papers spread out, ribbons, seals, dates that don't lie. The whole room went quiet. Before we go on, tell us where you're watching from and hit subscribe. What happens next changes everything. That morning at Seabright Mutual had started like any other. Quiet lines, lemon-polished counters, the harbor wind tapping the glass. Lionel Graves stood in the center of the lobby, thin and steady, coat still wet at the cuffs. He didn't blink at the pointing phones or whispered jokes. He bent, gathered the first document with 2 careful fingers, and smoothed its edge like a man handling a family photo. "Sir, you can't stage a scene here," said the branch manager. Owen Rask. His voice was bright and false. "Hand those to security." "I will not," Lionel said. "They are mine." 2 guards moved at once. Their radios hissed. One reached for Lionel's arm. "Easy," Tessa Nguyen called from behind the counter. She was the youngest teller on the row, hair pinned back, nameplate new. "Maybe. Just a second." Owen cut her a look sharp enough to slice paper. "Back to your window, Miss Nguyen." The older guard hooked an elbow under Lionel's, polite but firm. The satchel gaped on the floor, papers breathing in the air. Thick vellum, worn seals pressed with a compass rose and 3 stars, old signatures that curled like waves. "This bank was built with my money," Lionel said softly, not to Owen, not to the crowd, but to the room itself. "And I have the record." Phones lifted higher. Someone snorted. Someone else whispered, "Props." Lionel reached inside his coat and brought out a small steel punch on a leather thong, the kind clerks once used to mark ledgers. Its nose showed a tiny burr at true north. Owen laughed too loud. "A trinket from a flea market." "Your archive stamps leave a notch at the north point," Lionel said. "They always have." A retired bookkeeper in line squinted. "I remember that notch," she murmured to no one. "Caught my sleeve every time." The guards hesitated. The room tilted. Tessa stepped away from her station and knelt by the nearest page. She lifted it by the corners like she'd been taught in training for old checks. "It's a deed," she said, voice barely above a breath. "From the founding trust." Owen's smile cracked. "Put that down." She didn't. Her eyes flicked from the seal to the date to Lionel's face. She seemed to make a choice. The doors opened with a sigh. 2 officers stepped through in blue, the street's salt wind following them. A few customers shifted, making room. The officers' hands hovered near their belts, not touching, just thinking. "Morning," Lionel said to them, as if greeting neighbors. "No disturbance here. Only history." Owen lifted his chin. "Officers, he's trespassing. He's upsetting customers. Remove him and take his bag as evidence." "The bag stays with me," Lionel said. "Unless you have a warrant." Tessa glanced at the officers. "He's right." A low ripple moved across the lobby. Not laughter now. Something else. Doubt. Maybe shame. The older guard eased his grip. The younger one looked to Owen and then away, like a man checking the weather before setting sail. Lionel crouched and slid the papers back into the satchel, one by one. He tucked the steel punch into his palm and stood, the strap crossing his chest again like a sash. "You all remember this moment," he said, voice calm as a dock at dawn. "Because I will." Owen tried to clap his hands to break the spell. "Show's over. Back to banking." No one moved. Lionel turned toward the doors. He walked past the officers, past the blinking phones, past the compass crest in the floor's brass inlay. Tessa's hand hovered in the air, then dropped, like she wanted to stop him and didn't know how yet. Outside, the harbor smell rose. Salt, diesel, rope. Lionel didn't hurry. He never did. The satchel pulled on his shoulder. He let it. Inside, the retired bookkeeper stepped closer to the crest and ran a fingertip over the tiny burr at North. She frowned, like a memory had just tapped her on the shoulder. Tessa returned to her window, but she didn't see the screen. She saw a steel punch, a seal, a date that refused to be wished away. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number on the display. She looked at Owen pacing, at the guards pretending to be busy, at the customers pretending not to be watching. Then she stepped back, lifted the phone, and whispered, "Mr. Graves, it's Tessa, from the bank." Rain slid down the library's tall windows in slow lines. Lionel waited at a corner table with his satchel on the chair beside him. He looked like a quiet man passing time. He wasn't. Tessa stepped in, damp hair tucked behind her ears. She scanned the room, saw him, and came over fast, as if courage might leak if she walked slow. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "Thank you for calling," he said. They sat. The library hummed with whispers and soft printer beeps. Tessa glanced at the satchel and then at his hands. They were steady, brown, lined with small cuts like old maps. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Walk in and claim the bank?" "Because it was mine," he said. "Because it is." She waited. "My mother kept books for fishermen," Lionel said. "My father mixed mortar when the first vault was laid. We put land into the trust, not cash. Land at the edge of the harbor where the new docks sit now. The papers name us. The old ones. Before the name change. Before the smoothing," Tessa breathed in. "And they erased you." "They tried," he said. They moved words. Shifted dates. Filed copies without seals. Hired men who talk well. "But paper remembers when people forget," she leaned in. "What happens if you're right? If this is real," his eyes held hers, "then the town knows who built its house of money. And those who took credit will have to share it. Some will have to answer for what they moved." They were quiet for a moment. Rain tapped the glass like fingers. "I want to help," Tessa said. "You could lose your job," he said. "Your peace," she swallowed. "Maybe, but I watched them laugh. I felt wrong and small. I don't want to feel that again." Lionel nodded once. "Then we begin." Across town, Owen Rask sat in his dim office with the blinds half closed. He stared at a paused video of the lobby scene. The comments rolled like ants. Some mocked. Many did not. His phone rang. He answered before the second buzz. "Is it contained?" a voice asked. "Smooth. Expensive." "We're handling it," Owen said. "You are not," the voice replied. "The clip is everywhere. If he has originals, you shut the doors before he reaches a judge. Do you understand?" Owen swallowed. "I'll manage staff. The girl, too." "Do not make her a martyr," the voice said. "Make her uncertain. Make everyone uncertain." The line went dead. Owen stared at his reflection in the dark screen. He looked smaller than he felt yesterday. At the library, Lionel placed a single sheet on the table. He did not slide it across. He let Tessa look without touching. It was thick. Cream. The ink had a faint sheen even in dull light. A compass rose with 3 stars stamped near the top. Names in a looping hand. A plot number by the water. A date older than Tessa's parents. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "My mother kept a copy," he said. "In a place nobody checked because nobody thought she would matter." Tessa smiled, small and sad. "Mothers matter." He smiled back, the first real smile of the day. "They do," she pointed. "This signature, yours?" "My father's," he said. "Mine came later. A small addendum when I turned 21. That paper is in the same hand. Different ink. Same seal." She nodded slowly, filing details like a clerk, like a witness. "We'll need more," she said. "Not just this page, a chain. Something they can't call a trick." "I have what I have," he said. "And one place they forgot." She looked up. "What place?" He shook his head. "Not yet. If we move wrong, they will close it." Tessa sat back. pulse in her throat. Then we move right, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She glanced at Lionel. He nodded, she answered. Hello? Miss Nguyen, a calm voice said. Friendly advice. Keep your head down. There's nothing for you in this mess. Who is this? She asked. A watcher, the voice said. Don't tether yourself to a ghost story. The call ended. Tessa stared at the screen. Her hand shook once and then steadied. They're watching, she said. They always watch, Lionel said, until they feel watched. She closed her eyes for a beat and opened them clear. What do you need from me? Access to public things most people ignore, he said. Old ledgers, sign-in logs, stamp blocks. Not hidden, just dusty. I can do dusty, she said. Good, he said. Evening fell early. The harbor lights blinked in the fog. Lionel walked Tessa to the door. Tomorrow, she said. I'll start in archives. If anyone asks, I'm balancing end-of-month records. Be careful with the manager, he said. I will, she said. And you? I will wait where the tide waits, he said. And I will keep the paper dry, she laughed softly. You always talk like that? Only when it matters, he said. They parted on the steps. Tessa moved toward the bus stop, head down, coat pulled tight. Lionel turned the other way, the satchel pressing his shoulder like a hand. Above them, gulls wheeled pale in the streetlights. Somewhere far off, a foghorn sounded, long and low, as if the harbor itself remembered a promise and was calling it back. Morning came gray and cold. Tessa swiped into the archive room and let the door close softly behind her. Dust hung in the beam from a high, humming light. The room smelled like cardboard and old ink. She pulled on gloves, rolled a cart, opened the first steel drawer. Ledger books sat like sleeping animals. She eased one out and set it on the felt pad. Inside, sign-in logs from 40 years ago. Names, times, reasons. The compass rose stamp landed beside each line, always with a tiny notch at north. She took notes fast. Parcel numbers, initials that matched Lionel's page, a line that read, Transfer Review, Dock Expansion Fund. The date bothered her. It was 1 week after the bank changed its name. A shadow fell across the table. Busy this morning? Owen asked, voice light. Tessa kept her hand steady. Month-end balancing. Old entries, he nodded too quickly. Of course. Just be careful what you photograph. Policy. I know policy, she said. He smiled without his eyes and left. The door didn't close all the way. She could feel him still there, listening to the quiet. She waited, counted to 20. The hallway footsteps faded. She leaned in and found another odd line. Archive stamp repair, North Burr filed. The note had a tiny smudge next to it, as if the pen hesitated. But when she checked later stamps, the notch still showed. The repair never happened. Or someone wrote it so others would think it did. Her pulse ticked. She copied the page number and the box code on a small card, then slid the ledger back where it belonged. Across town, Lionel walked the pier as the tide turned. The satchel was lighter today, not because he had fewer papers, but because he had help. His phone rattled. A number he didn't know. Mr. Graves, a male voice said. Victor Halbrook, chairman of Seabright's board. Lionel waited. You've made quite a spectacle, Halbrook said. Let's not ruin a respectable institution with old misunderstandings. Come in quietly and we will consider a settlement. Consider, Lionel repeated. A generous one, Halbrook said. Provided you stop. Lionel watched a gull skate the wind. Paper does not stop, he said. It waits. Be reasonable, Halbrook snapped. You're elderly. This will consume you. Then it will have company, Lionel said, and ended the call. He stood a long minute, feeling the wind push and pull like a tide inside his chest. Then he turned toward the municipal side of the harbor. Tessa met him there at noon. Outside, a low brick building marked Harbor Records. She had traded her heels for sneakers and tied her hair back with a rubber band from a bundle of pens. I found lines, she said without hello. Sign-ins, a fake repair note, and a date that matters, Lionel nodded. Good. What's here? She asked, looking up at the brick. Surveys, he said. Original harbor plats. When land was carved into parcels, the assessor kept a copy. The bank filed theirs. The assessor filed theirs. They forgot that second copy because it wasn't under their roof. A clerk with a cardigan buzzed them in. Public hours are short, she said kindly. Pick what you need. They followed her to the back where map tubes lay in wooden cubbies like organ pipes. Each tube had a brass tag. Tessa read them in a whisper. Mariner's End, Wharf Street, Breakwater. Lionel slid a tube free with both hands and set it on the table. He popped the cap. Inside was a roll of heavy paper tied with faded ribbon. He didn't touch it. Gloves? He asked. The clerk nodded and brought a box. Turn only by the edges, she said. We've lost corners to eager fingers. They untied the ribbon. The map opened slow. Lines of ink traced the shoreline like veins. Parcel B at the docks. A name in the margin, Graves & Co. Harbor Trust Partners. A second name crossed through, replaced by a newer hand, dated 1 week later. Tessa stared. They altered the bank copy, then mirrored it here a week after the name change, she said. But they missed the stamp, she pointed. In the corner sat a compass rose seal. North chipped. 3 stars clear. The municipal file had been stamped with the same flawed punch. Their story says the burr was fixed, she whispered. This says it wasn't. Footsteps approached. The clerk's head tilted, listening. A man in a tailored coat stepped in, breath white from the cold. He gave the clerk a practiced smile and flashed a badge from the city attorney's office. Routine audit, he said. Pulling harbor plats for review, the clerk blinked. All of them. For now, he said. His eyes flicked to the table where the map lay open. Starting with that one, Tessa felt heat climb her neck. Lionel didn't move. Public hours are posted, the clerk said, polite but firm. These patrons were here first, the man smiled thinner. And yet, he stepped closer. Tessa slid a hand over the corner of the map without touching ink. We're almost finished, she said. You're from the bank, the man said, as if identifying a bird. Miss Nguyen, we've met your manager, she swallowed. I'm on my lunch break. Then don't choke on it, he said softly. Lionel lifted the steel punch from his satchel and set it on the edge of the table. The leather thong coiled like a small snake. The man's eyes caught on the tiny burr at North, just for a second. You won't need that, the man said. We do, Lionel said. Silence held for a breath. The clerk cleared her throat. You can both look, she said. But no one removes anything. Copies only. The man's jaw worked. He took out his phone and snapped photos. Tessa did too, fast and clean. Parcel B, date, seal, notch. When they retied the ribbon, Tessa's hands shook. Outside, she exhaled hard. They're moving now, she said. They move when something threatens to stand, Lionel said. What's the plan? She asked. 2 steps, he said. We show a chain the public can see. Then we show one thing they forgot they can't touch. What thing? She asked. He looked at the steel punch. Every stamp leaves a pattern on the backboards, he said. Impressions. Tiny. If the old backboards in Seabright's cellar still exist, the pattern is there. They can't forge that in a day, Tessa nodded. So we go into the cellar. He nodded once. She looked back at harbor records and then at the bank across the water. They'll try to block it. They will, he said. She zipped her jacket. Then we go now while they're still taking photos. They started walking. The wind came hard off the water, sharp as a warning and clean as a promise. They entered through the side door, marked Deliveries. Tessa's badge clicked them past the first gate. The air turned cooler, then damp. Stairs dropped to a concrete hallway with old paint peeling in curls. The cellar is past records, she whispered. They moved fast but quiet. Pipes rattled above. A mop bucket sat lonely in a corner, water gray as the harbor. At a locked metal door, Tessa swiped. The reader blinked red. She swore under her breath. New permissions. Lionel touched the handle, thinking. He pointed to a second, older door half hidden by a cart of banker's boxes. The hasp had a padlock, but the padlock had rust. He looked at Tessa. She nodded. Maintenance forgot this one. They slid the cart aside. Lionel pulled a small pry bar from the satchel. Dull, wrapped in cloth to stay quiet. 2 careful twists. The lock gave with a soft groan. Inside, wood and dust wrapped them. Shelves held stacked backboards. Thick oak planks with shallow dents where stamps had struck for decades. Tessa's breath fogged. Here. They set the steel punch on a crate and lifted the first board to the table. The surface looked almost smooth at first, but under the phone's flashlight, tiny moons and nicks became visible. North had a burr bite, a little scar that repeated in a curve across the board. She took photos at an angle. Then closer still. Not enough, Lionel said. We need the run. They moved board to board. The same crescent sat at the north of each old impression. Years of use, one flaw, a fingerprint in wood. Steps sounded in the hall. Tessa froze. The light bobbed. Owen stood in the doorway with 2 guards and a man in a charcoal suit, the one from Harbor Records. Owen smiled thinly. Field trip? This room is on your fire plan, Lionel said. Maybe check the locks. It's also off limits, Owen said. You can't be here, Tessa kept her voice even. Archive inspection. Backboard condition, the man in charcoal held up a hand. Enough, close it down. A guard stepped in. Bag, he said to Lionel. The satchel stays, Lionel said. The second guard reached anyway. Tessa's heart kicked. The board slipped in her hands and clacked against the table, sending a small puff of dust into the beam. The man in charcoal glanced at the steel punch on the crate. He hid the flicker in his eyes, but Tessa saw it. Take the tool, he said. No, Lionel said. It's mine. Then we'll take you, the man said. You're trespassing. Public area, Lionel said. Basement of a bank, yes. But you invited the public when you took their deposits and put the plaque by the door. Cute, Owen said. Officers are on their way. Call them, Tessa said. Her voice surprised her with how flat it was. You can explain why your cellar door's padlock is decorative and why your archive backboards still carry a north burr. You claim was filed smooth. Owen's mouth opened, closed. The man in charcoal didn't. Blink, Lionel lifted one, bored, and held his phone low, light skimming shallow. The tiny crescent glowed like a thin wave under moonlight. Every stamp leaves a bruise, he said. Yours leaves the same bruise. Year after year. The footsteps of real officers grew in the hall. Blue sleeves. Quiet, eyes. What's this? One asked. Private area, Owen said fast. Trespass and theft of materials. Nothing's been removed, Tessa said. We're documenting a physical pattern. It supports a claim already filed at Harbor Records. The officer looked at Lionel, then at the boards, then at the steel punch. He crouched and peered close. He didn't touch. He nodded once as if something old in his head had clicked into place. Let's go upstairs, he said. If we're going to argue, let's argue in the light. The lobby was a slow storm building. Word had traveled. People stood in loose knots, phones up. The brass compass crest gleamed in the floor like a coin tossed in a well. Owen tried to take the center. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for disruptions. The bank remains secure. Lionel set the oak board on a low table. He placed the steel punch beside it. He laid 3 photos in a row. Backboard bruise, municipal seal, ledger stamp. Same crescent. Same north notch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This is wood, he said. It remembers. This is paper. It remembers. These are dates. They remember. And all of them say the same thing. A murmur rolled through the room. Not noisy, heavy. The man in charcoal stepped forward. "Unverified images," he said. "Easily faked." "Then test them," Tessa said. "In court, with experts. But don't pretend your punch doesn't bite north. Everyone here can see it." She held up the steel punch. The tiny burr caught the light. A retired clerk near the back lifted her hand to her mouth. "I stamped with that," the clerk said. "For 20 years. Tore more sleeves than I'll admit." Victor Halbrook walked in then, flanked by 2 men with perfect hair. He scanned the table, the board, the punch. He aimed a smile at the room. "Friends," he boomed, "we love our history. We'll review these claims with care." "Review," Lionel said softly. "You called me this morning to buy silence." Halbrook's smile stalled. The room heard it. Phones leaned in. "We make many calls," he said. "We are a bank." "And I am a man," Lionel said. "With a stamp that bit north before your father took a chair. With a map you tried to pull. With ledgers you told your manager to guard like they were yours." Halbrook's voice thinned. "You are making a scene." "No," Lionel said. "I am making a record." He took the steel punch, aligned it over a blank scrap of oak, and pressed once, firm. He lifted it. The audience leaned as one. There it was. The crescent at north. Clear as a scar, silence landed. Then a low sound, not quite a cheer, more like air returning to lungs. Owen reached for the punch, then thought better. The officers watched without moving. The man in charcoal stared a second longer than he meant to and stepped back. Tessa set the new impression beside the photos. "Chain of proof," she said. "Backboard bruise. Municipal seal. Ledger stamp. Fresh strike. Same notch." Halbrook tried one last angle. "If a flaw exists, it proves only that a tool was imperfect, not that a claim is true." "It proves the story you told about repairs is false," Tessa said. "And that makes the rest worth testing in public." A reporter pushed through. "Mr. Graves, are you accusing the bank of altering historical records?" Lionel looked into the camera like he was looking into a person's eyes. "I am saying some men changed a story to fit their names," he said. "I am asking this town to read the old one." The compass crest in the floor seemed to turn under the lights, north steady, everything else moving. The crowd pressed closer, not loud, but certain. For the first time, Halbrook looked smaller. "Lock the cellar," he told Owen. The officer cleared his throat. "No, not today. Not until a judge says so." Flashbulbs popped. The air tasted like copper and salt. Lionel folded his hands on the oak board and stood very still, as if he were listening for something deep under the building. Tessa stood beside him, shoulders squared, ready for the next hit and the next. Outside, the harbor wind rose. Inside, the story turned. By noon the next day, tape lines marked a space on the marble floor. Reporters clustered behind them. The oak board and the fresh strike sat under a clear cover, guarded by 2 officers with calm faces. A clerk pinned a notice on the wall. "Records under preservation order. Do not remove." A judge had signed it that morning after a quick hearing. Independent examiners were assigned. The cellar stayed sealed. The backboards stayed where they were. For once, paper would not be moved in the dark. Victor Halbrook arrived with a tidy statement and careful smiles. Owen Rask stood a step behind, tie too tight, palms damp. The man in the charcoal suit did not come inside. He watched from the sidewalk, phone at his ear, breath fogging in the wind. Tessa walked in with a folder and a steady stride. She wasn't hiding now. People made room for her without being told. Lionel followed, the satchel across his chest, the steel punch in his pocket like a heartbeat. A city historian stepped forward with a small stack. "Old photos from the newspaper morgue," she said. "Founders on opening week. The seal is visible if you look hard enough." They set the prints beside the cover. The same compass rose. The faint nick at north catching sun. Halbrook cleared his throat. "We respect history," he said. "We have requested a full review." You requested silence yesterday, Lionel said, not loud. Phones turned. Halbrook's jaw twitched. We make many requests. The lead examiner arrived with a kit and a calm hello. She studied the board, the stamps, the map copies. She measured. She photographed with a raking light. She took a rub of the bruise with soft graphite and peeled the page back slow. The crescent lay on the paper like a moon. Distinctive, she said. Consistent, a murmur rolled across the lobby. Owen stared at the ceiling as if it might lower and give him a shield. By late afternoon, a second order came down. The bank's internal archive would be copied and logged by an outside team. No items moved without receipts. No doors relocked without a list. Owen was placed on leave before closing time. The email used polite words. He boxed his framed photo and a plant and did not look at anyone on the way out. The man in charcoal faded with him into the street like a shadow going back to its wall. The board called a special session. Halbrook spoke into a cluster of cameras on the steps. We will cooperate, he said. We welcome clarity. A voice in the crowd answered, We welcome truth. It sounded like the retired clerk who had once cursed her torn sleeves. People nodded without knowing why they were nodding. Sometimes a town just decides to stand up straight. A week later, they met in a packed hearing room. The examiners laid out their work. The bruise patterns matched. The municipal stamp matched. The ledger marks matched. Dates lined up. A phone log of a settlement call was entered without drama, just a page, just ink. The judge spoke in a level tone. The evidence supports preservation and further inquiry, she said. It supports public acknowledgement of early partners and correction of records where required. This court orders continued protection of all materials and directs a formal review under supervision. Halbrook's lawyer asked for time. He received time. He also received a list of things he could no longer do while time passed. Lionel did not cheer. He sat very still, hands folded, eyes damp and bright. When the gavel touched wood, he closed his eyes and let a long breath go, like a man setting a heavy box down without dropping it. Outside, the air smelled of salt and rain. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. Lionel kept his words simple. We ask to be read, he said. Now we will be. Tessa stood beside him, a little to the back, as if ready to catch a wind that might shove. The historian came forward with a folder for Lionel. Inside, a clean copy of the old photo. Two men in front of new doors, both smiling like they had no idea how long a shelf life a story could have. Weeks turned. Examiners worked in the archive, gentle with the boards, careful with the maps. A small team from the city cataloged each stamp face and each backboard bruise, row by row. The steel punch, after a vote, went into a clear case at the local museum on loan. Label neat, Seabright Archive stamp, C. 1960s, North Burr variant. Some afternoons, Lionel walked past the bank and nodded at the compass in the floor. No one stopped him now. Tessa sometimes met him at the breakwall with 2 cups of cheap coffee. They talked about the rain, the boats, and sometimes about his mother's numbers in the margins of old ledgers, neat as lace. What will you do when this is over? She asked one evening, coat collar up, hair loose in the wind. He watched the water, black and bright at once. Put the papers where everyone can see them, he said, and take the long walk without the satchel just once. She smiled. I'd like to see that. Spring leaned in on the harbor. A new plaque went up in the lobby, words short and plain, names sorted right at last. People stopped to read it. Some touched the brass, as if touching names could pass a current between past and now. On a clear morning, Lionel carried the satchel to the museum and signed the loan card with a slow, careful hand. He stood in front of the case a while, looking at the little burr that had outlived so many tidy lies. Tessa found him there. Feels lighter? She asked. He lifted the empty strap and laughed, soft and amazed. It does. They walked outside and stood where the wind could find them. The gulls threw white arcs against the sky. The water made its old familiar sound against the stones. "Paper remembers," he said. "People do too," she said. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. The harbor kept talking to the shore, steady and patient, like it always had. And for once, the story on the land matched the one the water already knew.